Hi everybody, it's Honest John. In the last election, the states the Republicans controlled tried in every way they could to prevent black people, Latinos, students, and anybody else who might vote against them from exercising their constitutional right to vote. They did things like reducing the time allowed for early voting. They moved polling places so that people who lived in white neighborhoods had no waiting at all, while the lines in minority neighborhoods, the wait times were several hours. They passed voter ID laws. They say it will prevent voter fraud, which they have no evidence actually happens. But for them, it was worth it, even though the cost of that would have been disenfranchising millions of legal, legitimate American voters. In Texas, they passed an ID law that would recognize a hunting license as a valid ID, but not a student ID. In Alabama, members of the state legislature used racial slurs while trying to figure out how to keep a referendum off the ballot, which they felt would bring out black voters. In Alaska, they moved a polling place that would have forced many Aleuts to fly or take a boat just in order to vote. Now, many of these maneuvers were stopped by the Justice Department because those states were covered by the Voting Rights Act. In some other states, the courts stopped them. But some states weren't stopped at all. Remember the disgraceful display of voters forced to wait for hours in line to exercise their constitutional right to vote in places like Florida and Wisconsin. Yesterday, the Supreme Court disgraced itself again. The 5 conservative members of the court allied themselves with those who would steal away the right to vote from legitimate Americans. They took away the power of the Justice Department to prevent states from rigging elections by disenfranchising minority voters. When they wrote their decision, they began with a lie. They said that Congress, when they reauthorized the Voting Rights Act, relied on data from the 1960s. But the truth is that there were documented cases of the states covered by the act attempting to prevent minorities from exercising their right to vote in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. There are also some real problems with the way that they gerrymandered their congressional districts. And some of these were cited in the dissenting opinions, but the conservative justices ignored these well-documented cases. They also ignored the most recent attempts in the last election by Republicans to disenfranchise voters just that little time ago. Scalia, during the oral arguments in the case, said that voting for minorities was a privilege. I guess he forgot that that right is enshrined in the Constitution for all citizens. It is not a right for white people and a privilege for others. We know Scalia is a bigot. I believe that that statement confirms it. Immediately after the court decision, states like Texas and South Carolina and Arkansas immediately declared that the racist laws designed to disenfranchise minority voters, which had been held back by the Voting Rights Act, were now in effect. Now, it's true that they can be sued and these laws can be stopped. But here is the strategy that they used to follow. They then immediately pass another law with just a slight change in language that would accomplish the same thing, and the process starts all over again. So the people trying to defend their rights wind up having to work really hard and spend a lot of money that they shouldn't have to. This is the kind of whack-a-mole strategy that the Voting Rights Act was designed to stop. And they can now go back to that strategy with the blessing of the court. Adding to their disgrace is the absolute cowardice they displayed in trying to avoid responsibility for their decision. Without giving any guidance as to what changes would be acceptable to them, they left Congress the option of revising the law to their satisfaction. And I guarantee that if Congress could do that, there would be nothing that they would do that would satisfy those justices. And the Supremes, they don't live in a vacuum. They know what our Congress is like. They see the gridlock that is there, and they know that they have killed the Voting Rights Act, but they want to put the blame on Congress and not stand on their own feet and admit their racism and bigotry. And when I say that they're racist, I include Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas is a self-hating Negro who despises his own people as much as the KKK does. Now, the Roberts Court will go down as the worst in the history of the United States just for the Citizens United decision alone. But this decision is racist, dishonest, and cowardly. I suppose I'm screwing up my karma, but it's a fact. Being a Supreme Court justice is a lifetime job. So I just hope that the conservative justices of the Supreme Court will die before they can do this country any more harm. Thanks for listening.